Okay. Hello, Dr. Lycka. How are you?
I'm fine, Douglas. How are you today?
Doing very well, thank you. Thank you for coming on the show. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me as a guest. It is my delight.
As I was saying before we got on, I really like your background there. It's kind of Japanese shoji screen looking. It's very, very nice. Yeah,
It's simple, but it's effective. And I
yeah,
think anybody
absolutely.
can have a nice, simple, effective background like this if they want to.
Well, you know what? It works better than a lot of people use those green screen backgrounds, which are fine. But if you try to move or do anything, the picture sort of disintegrates and things disappear into the background, and it never looks quite right. But
No, I
this
find they
is,
bleed a bit, and
they
you
bleed.
sort of go
Yeah.
into the background as well, and it's just not perfect. So I elected to do something simple yet effective. So that's why I have this background.
Oh, it works very well. Looks very nice. So your story is pretty amazing. I was reading through your bio, and I think we'll just start with that.
Well, let me take your listeners back to 2003. I was walking with my dear wife in Disneyland, and my wife turned to me and said, "What's wrong with you, hon?" I was taken by aback. I didn't perceive anything wrong, but she was persistent. She said, "What's wrong with you?" I said, "Dear, I haven't got the faintest thing you're talking about." She said, "Listen to your foot." Well, dear, again, I'm out in left field. I don't know what you're talking about. She said, "Well, listen to it." Well, my right foot had suddenly and mysteriously developed a right foot drop. And so there began my journey and began my odyssey. My wife said, when we get back, you better get this checked out. Well, Douglas, when your spouse says that to you, you know you have no choice but to get it checked out. So I went to see dozens of doctors, probably hundreds of doctors by the time I finished. They did CAT scans, they did brain scans, they did scans. And you know what they showed at the end of the day? They showed absolutely nothing.
Okay.
And when doctors are faced with a diagnosis of absolutely nothing, they don't like it. So they do more tests and they do more tests and they do more tests. And I ended up with probably $1 billion workup at the end of the day. I had tests that didn't even exist yet. And so I ended up on the doorstep of a world leading neurologist. A neurologist is a brain doctor. He's the guy that's supposed to have all the answers to the puzzle. And I walked in and I said, "Hi." He said, "Hi back." He said, "You better be sitting down when I tell you this." I said, "Why? I have a dropped right foot." He said, "No, you don't. You have ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease. Get your affairs in order. In 6 months, you're going to be dead." Wow, that was quite a how do you do, Douglas. So I shot back, "Is there a way to prove this diagnosis?" He said, "Of course, an autopsy."
An autopsy.
An
Oh,
autopsy.
I'm glad he had a sense of humor.
Yeah, great sense of humor. Really no bedside manner to go around with it. So, what I did at that point is I shot back. I'm not going to die to prove you wrong. But Douglas, our bodies and brains are programmed to go through a grief reaction when something like this happens. We go through 5 phases, and Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, in a book called On Death and Dying, defined those very well. And the first phase is anger. Anger is a motivational force. You can bite the head off nails, and basically you start getting angry and angry and angry, and you're not even sure what you're angry at. So I was angry at that time, and I'm still angry at this doctor right now for his lack of compassion and caring. But I've learned to get over it. And you go through denial. Denial is another thing the body goes through, and we're not talking about a river in Egypt. We're talking about denying that this actually occurred. But you can't deny it when your right foot isn't working right. And my right hand started not working right either. And this was a big concern for me because I was a cosmetic doctor. But Douglas, I'm a very talented doctor and I use my left hand a lot. So I became left handed. And that was interesting because left handed instruments don't exist for surgeons. So I had to invent my own tools. I went through bargaining. bargaining is when you say, oh God, please don't let this happen. I'll do anything if you don't let this happen. But God wasn't listening. At least he didn't appear to be in my case. And then comes the worst one, which is depression. Depression, Douglas, is when the world turns black. Everything turns black. You lie in bed, you don't see a meaning to it all, and you want to stay in bed all day. Everything's dark and gloomy. And that's a tough, tough phase to beat your way through. But I was motivated and I wasn't going to let this happen. The last phase that Elizabeth Kubler-Ross has is acceptance, where you accept the diagnosis. Well, I wasn't going to accept something, Douglas, because I knew that this wasn't right. I knew in my heart of hearts there was something wrong with this picture. I'm a medical doctor, Douglas, and I know doctors do not always see things right. Not everything is black and white as we'd love it to be. Quite often we're putting a round peg in a square hole, and that's what was going on here. So I went to my wife and I said, wife, what's wrong with me? She said, I haven't got the faintest idea. My wife's a doctor too, and she said, but you're smart, you can figure it out. Well, I said, thanks for the vote of confidence, but I've seen every doctor I know. Where do I turn to? And back then, something new was invented, Douglas. You might have heard of it. It's called the internet. You ever hear of that beast?
Oh, yeah. I think so,
Yeah.
vaguely.
Yeah. Back then, Dr. Google didn't exist. He was not alive yet. But we did have computers, and we had something called a dial-on connection, where you can communicate with another computer, and you can search the net back then in a very primitive way. So I got on my dial-on connection with the help of friends. Ria, Ria, Ria. And I went through a very primitive search engine. And I found a doctor in Colorado Springs, Colorado, by the name of David Martz, who had a symptoms similar to mine, but he got worse much more rapidly than I did. So I knew I had to get in touch with him. So I got in touch with him in Colorado Springs, Colorado. And David told me a very interesting story. He was on his deathbed. He was diagnosed as ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease. But doctors from around the world were coming to say goodbye to him because they thought he was going to die. And a doctor came up from Texas and looked at David and said, David, I don't think you have ALS. I don't think you have Lou Gehrig's disease. I think you have something called chronic Lyme's disease, which is the bite of a tick, which mimics ALS and causes symptoms very similar to it. Well, David whispered at that time because he was so weak. He said, what do I do? The doctor from Texas said, David, all you have to do is start on some antibiotics, and I think you're going to get rapidly better. And it was a miracle. David was like Lazarus arising from the dead, and he got better within a couple of weeks. And then he started a clinic to treat people with this disease called the Rocky Mountain Chronic Disease Clinic. It was in Colorado Springs, Colorado. So I knew I had to get down to see him. He said, come on down. So I flew from Edmonton to Denver, which was a great flight. But then I got on a little flight from Denver to Colorado Springs, a little puddle jumper. Douglas, you ever been on a puddle jumper?
Yeah, certainly.
They are difficult flights, to say the least. This little puddle jumper was 10 seats in capacity. But at the end of the day, the air arises off the desert and it causes turbulence. So that plane would climb and then it would drop 100 feet. It would climb, then it would drop 200 feet. It would climb and then drop 300 feet. It was like the drop of doom at Disneyland over and over and over again. So I think you get my message. I was green when I got off that plane. I crawled off that plane, and there was David on the tarmac to meet me. This was pre-high security from 9/11 back then. They hadn't installed it. So there was David with his truck on the tarmac, and he said, let's go talk. And he told me some amazing words. He said, Dr. Lycka, I think history is repeating itself. And he started me on treatment. And so I was able to maintain my status as a top cosmetic doctor for over 30 years until I walked away last year to serve people in another capacity. Because when you go through this, Douglas, you start to look at the world differently. You collect the dots. You start to see what the world is. And that's why I wrote this book called The Secrets to Living a Fantastic Life, which has got 13 golden pearls in it, which I rediscovered. These are pearls that are found in every one of us. And you know, Douglas, what causes a pearl?
Do I know what causes a pearl?
Yeah, in nature. How does an
Oh,
oyster
and
form a pearl?
I thought it was pressure.
You know, it's not pressure, but it's irritation. A little grain of sand gets inside of the wall of an oyster shell, and that oyster doesn't like it. It gets traumatized, so it walls it off. It puts this wonderful, gorgeous material called luster around this grain of salt. And what happens is it produces this beautiful, wonderful, golden opportunity. And these pearls actually exist in the South Pacific, and a single solitary pearl costs upwards of $10,000. That's how magnificent they are.
Tell us a little bit about the book. You said 13 golden pearls. So this is like 13 concepts, ideas, words to
You know,
live
I'd
by?
like to call them golden pearls of wisdom. I think that's the best way to describe them. Each
Okay.
one of us has these golden pearls inside of us, and we can bring them out anytime we want to. You know, we start with golden pearl number one, which is love, and we end up with empowerment, which is golden pearl number 13. We even throw in a bonus pearl, which is fear, which is many people are going through right now, especially in this day and age when we're going through a very cataclysmic time in this world that we're dealing with right now.
Yes, it's very true. Unfortunately, we're kind of running down on time. We've got about 2 minutes or so.
Well, you know what I would like to do is I would love to tell people to go and get a copy of my book at drallenlycka.com. That's DRALLEN, Lycka, LYCKA.com. On the website, you can get a free PDF of my book. Please read it because there's a lot of good things in there. And if you'd like to get in touch with me, just go to my website and get in touch with my assistant because I'd love to help your guests overcome the challenges in their life that may be facing at this time. So that's how I'd like to do that, Doug, if it's possible. People
Sure.
can find out and reach more with me. Follow me on social media. Follow me on other things because I have a lot more podcasts out there. On my website, I've got over 100 podcasts that people can go to and learn more and find out more about me.
Okay, great. So the bottom line with all of that is it turned out not to be Lou Gehrig's disease and turned out to be Lyme's disease.
Yes, sir. And this is something that goes on in medicine is people sometimes get wrong diagnosis. So if you think that something's wrong, please check out a second opinion. I would encourage people to find out the true meaning of what's going on and also find out the true meaning that may be going on in their life. Read books, search, become the best version of yourself that you can be.
It seems to be going that direction anyways, that doctors are working more online. People are looking up things themselves. It used to be you went to the doctor for everything. Now it doesn't seem to be as necessary.
No, and I think now people have to take a choice and be the captains of their own destiny. And that means in all aspects of their life, they must take a pivotal role right now and help to get there.
I think so. Dr. Lycka, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story with us.
Douglas Coleman, thank you very much for having me. It has been